Hi everybody, this is Daryl Cross and thank you very much for taking time on a Friday, whether it's afternoon, morning, or early evening. We have some people from overseas attending today. Thank you very much for joining us today to talk about, of course, how to become an exceptional team leader at your firm. Big challenge for a lot of people because many of us got thrust into this role when all of a sudden we just happened to be the person in charge. It reminds me of a great story about legendary basketball coach Pat Summitt, who at the age of 22 and just a graduate assistant was thrust into the role of being the head coach after the head coach quit of the Lady Volunteers at the University of Tennessee. Now, any of you who have read ahead to the end of this story knows the fact that she became the most winning titled basketball coach, men or women, in NCAA history. But she had no idea what she was doing when she first started. And a lot of times, the leaders we have at firms are really thrust into this role. They all of a sudden don't notice that perhaps when someone asked for who'd like to be in charge, that everybody maybe took a step backwards. Or the fact that they just have the most tenure, they have the biggest relationships with a couple clients, but it doesn't prepare them for these new challenges that we see with law firms and running teams. And the fact is that these challenges are being driven by our clients as always. The demands that they have, the things that they would like to have, they're just changing faster than we are capable of adapting to. A lot of times just based on individual comforts and preferences. And we're piling all of these challenges on top of our lawyers, much less the team leaders of these lawyers who may be peers or maybe even slightly behind in terms of track. But at the same time, the challenge is our clients can't handle it either. So what are they doing? They're turning to grabbing more people and bringing them in-house to do the work themselves. They're demanding that we work and communicate better within our own firms, work with other firms. There are service providers like consultants and accountants, what have you. Really, the big change is this word collaboration. It is the primary thing that I spend most of my practice on is how do we build this culture of collaboration? Get away from the cult of personality that we have at a lot of firms and really look at collaboration because that is the new client currency and what they are demanding. And if we don't do it, we just will get to a point where we can't think fast enough, we can't know enough, we can't just rely on that one person to get it done. We really need teams. The challenge, though, is for a lot of people is people say this won't work at my firm. We have a few issues. We have the big elephants in the room of culture, compensation, and trust. So when we're talking about how to be an effective team leader, we're going to work backwards. We're going to talk about the research of how great teams operate. And we're going to come back to these issues of culture, compensation, and trust because they are primary ones, but they're not necessarily always in the right order. So when we study teams, what makes the most effective teams? There's 14 team performance indicators. And if you are a team leader, you have to manage these. They're broken into two pieces, positivity and productivity. And upon studying 20,000 teams at 4,000 organizations, these are those common threads. Productivity deals with getting things done. And then so how can that team leader help get things done? Positivity is about culture. Can that team leader break down the issues related to culture that allows us to get things done? We'll talk about a couple of these, but some important ones along the way: goals, alignment, trust, constructive interaction, debate even. These are all very important things because the typical team that we see at a law firm, this is a team leader view diagnostic that we do from an actual law firm that have some of the best and brightest minds in the world. And this is what the team leader result was when they do this assessment. Trust, very low. Goals and strategies, a little murky. Do we have constructive interaction or are people just always trying to get along with each other? And that's when we track these, we find our teams and the team leaders on top of them really falling into one of four worlds. We want to get into the top right corner, that's high team productivity. But only 12% of teams in the world get there. Most of them end up in the corners. High team positivity, like in the top left, everybody really likes each other, a lot of collegiality, let's do it, but we get nothing done. Or, on the other side, across from it, We're very, very productive. We love burning people into the ground, but everybody can't stand each other and can't wait to get out of here. Most teams fall in this, especially at law firms. It's very, very challenging. So when we go forward and start looking at why do teams fail, and thus, why is it the problem of the team leader to fix this? Well, there are 5 common things. This is what the team leader needs to look out for. The common success factors, whether you are a group of musicians, tap dancers, Navy SEALs, astronauts, whatever, are here. Goal alignment, role clarity, conflict resolution, communication, and culture. Goal alignment, specifically firm, individual, team, and client all together. Role clarity, who does what, who owns it? Is it always just the team leader? Can we actually have conflict, which we want on a team? Can we communicate the results, but not too much? And can we manage the culture long term? But let's talk about the things that team leaders do to kind of sabotage this sometimes. And sometimes this is all best of intentions. They are trying to be inclusive. They're trying to be collegial. They're trying to build a big tent for people to come under. But what we find is sometimes that's exactly what the problem is, especially at law firms when people have so much to do. We're managing peers. There's not direct authority over top of people. It's a little bit of a different hierarchy. So number 1 that we see, the team leader is always in charge. I'm the chair of this practice, this client team, this industry group, so I make the final decision. This doesn't work well. Think about it if you were a team of astronauts. One person's a pilot, one person's the commander, the other person has a mission specialty. Who's in charge there? They all are. The fact is, each is a team leader in their own right, this being the person that might be the commander of the mission, but they have to defer to someone else when they are not the expert at that one task. The other thing that we see is this constant obsession about compensation of how do we get people to participate? How do we do it? We got to change the comp system. We will never change the comp system. So what's the point? This is not what motivates people to be on teams. We have studied thousands of them in every industry, and law firms are no different. We'll get to what that is in just a moment. Mistake number 3, everybody gets a vote. And this is very common inside of places that's a partnership model. But the fact is, if I have a financial decision, I want a financial expert talking about that. If it's an expert I need on tax law, I don't need everybody on the team voting on what is the best approach if it's a tax issue. And this kind of collaboration to get along makes things not get done. Mistake number 4 that we see with team leaders, they have big, huge teams full of redundancy. The ideal team is 7 to 9, and they're very diverse skill sets and demographics, but we don't have to throw 20, 30, 40 people on it because then people can hide. And mistake number 5, team leaders, is they just don't do trust-building activities. And why is this so important? Because trust is the biggest elephant in the room. Not comp, not culture, it's trust. So if you are a team leader, these are your best practices. Number 1, team leaders are not always the person to make the decision if you're not the expert. A team leader guides and keeps people moving and manages the dynamics, but sometimes there's someone else on the team that should be in charge that day of the point or the issue we're trying to do. So don't confuse team leader with team dictator, because then also everybody thinks the team leader has to do all the work. So dealing with trust is the number 1 thing a team leader needs to worry about. We'll talk about how to do that. Not everybody has equal expertise, so role clarity of who is in charge of what piece and has ownership is critical for a team leader. We don't want to create a 30, 40, 50 member team where we have 3 or 4 people doing the exact same thing because it's a social club and everybody's looking at each other going, I thought you were going to do that. I thought you were going to do that. And then as we talk about with trust, coming back to it because it is so important, we have to find ways to have people demonstrating competency. A lot of times we can't just put people in front of clients for the first time and hope for the best. We need to run simulations, live simulations of client events, virtual simulations to help train them. That's how people get better. So, how do you build this great team? Well, when building a great team, think about all those factors we mentioned before. We've got to improve those 14 team characteristics, but sometimes that's just too many to tackle at one time. So we pick 1 or 2. We pick them along the way and we decide to say what this change continuum looks like. First of all, we got to assess what's going on because I may be stuck with the team I have. If you're a team leader, that happens a lot. Assess what's working, what's not. Team makeup, how we talk to each other, how we practice. Then stop doing the things that don't work immediately. Start to train and develop people, work on your strengths and people's strengths, and then make all these systems work together. Simple plan, not so simple to do. So some steps along the way for team leaders to consider. Number one, build a diverse team. And we use diversity and inclusion a lot in law firms, but when we define it on the basis of teams, it goes back to a classic example of people with complementary skills, common purpose, goals, and holding each other mutually accountable. What we want to see inside for team leaders is build these teams with what practice are they in? What's their perspective? Because they went to different schools, but also different demographics, diverse populations, whether that's race or female or orientation, whatever that might be. What is their skill set? Are they really good in front of clients? Are they better researchers? And what's their attitude? Because they have to have all these things on the right to make it work. The next thing we have to look at is assessing and diagnosing team performance. We have to get them out on the field, or at least the virtual field, to see how they can do today and tomorrow. We can do those online assessments that I talked about before, but you also have to start keeping in mind that I need to see how they perform in front of each other. How are they going to be in front of a client? Because that's usually what the challenge is building this trust culture. I ask lawyers all the time, how often do you share work or refer work internally? And it's not that often because of issues that I'm not sure if they'd handle it the right way or say the right things. So you got to start building that trust. And the way to do it is actually using simulations. Actually, in your practice group or client team meetings or industry group meetings, have simulated client conversations, prospect events, angry clients, new GC. You have to simulate these things. Do them live, do them virtually, but that is how all teams train over time to get used to each other and get comfortable with each other. And then we reassess and making sure we're going the right direction. Step 4 is to actually start to address this compensation issue, taking it off the table through accountability. One of the things that military pilots use is they just grade proficiency. Are people doing what they're supposed to? Talking to clients, attending the meetings, all team members are accountable, and put it up on the wall for everybody to see. Team leaders will get great buy-in and exposure by just doing this. And then 5, think of the team leader as coaching the entire team as a system. You may be stuck with some of those individuals. So how do we get the best out of them? We are talking about raising the realization rates on people. How do we get better out of the people we already have, the strategies we already have our firm, and if the team leader can just make everybody 10% better, that's a monumental accomplishment. We're going through a process of team optimization. We want to start off with assessment. How are we today? What do we have? We get everybody aligned with goals and what roles they're playing along there. Make sure we're all going the same direction. Then we develop them through simulations and client events and giving people the chance to demonstrate their competency in front of each other. That's how we get to optimal teams. And that is the job of the team leader. How do we focus on those key metrics that show that teams work and then start doing the process of over and over again of building trust that changes the culture, and compensation becomes a second thing that we worry about. Teams unleash potential. That is how all elite organizations do it. It's technically how artificial intelligence works. All these different pieces in parallel, putting together an integrated solution faster. So let's emulate them. We have examples of how these teams work. And in closing, keep in mind, our future leverage will be this. Artificial intelligence that we use being run by human teams, that will be the future leverage of law firms. Not more people, but how integrated teams work better together with a great leader in charge. So let's get to work. We have a lot to do to build a culture of collaboration in teams. I look forward to talking to you about it. Team coaching, team assessment, team development, but also challenging them with those simulations to build that trust that makes those teams work like they should.